go. Okay. So, brief explanation for anybody who might be watching this later on the YouTube live. We're going to do a little experiment today. We're going to reread from the beginning of chapter 5 in Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man. And we're going to frequently stop and discuss, answer questions, contribute what we know about it, etc., and then we'll move on to the next reading section. So I am. Well, then let me find. Okay, so here we go. Chapter 5. He drained his third cup of watery tea in the dregs and sat to chewing the crust of fried bread that were scattered near him, staring into the dark pool of the jar. The yellow dripping had been scooped out like a bog hole, and the pool under it brought back to his memory the dark, turf-colored water of the bath in Clongowes. The box of pawn tickets at his elbow had just been rifled, and he took up idly, one after another, in his greasy fingers, the blue and white dockets, scrawled and sanded and creased, and bearing the name of the pledger as Daly or McAvoy. One pair of buskins, one D coat, 3 articles in white, one man's pants. Then he put them aside and gazed thoughtfully at the lid of the box, speckled with louse marks, and asked vaguely, "How much is the clock fast now?" All right, I'm going to stop there.
All of the clocks seem to be wrong in this episode. A couple of pages later, near the hoardings on the canal, he met a consumptive man. Again, there's a question about timing and the clock being wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So what's going on?
It could be a thing called Irish time, which is a phenomenon only known in Ireland, where all times are approximate.
Yeah, and I think even in addition to it just being Irish time, it's the Joyce family time, and it's the James Joyce time. Like, I assume either the clock is so bad it can't be set correctly, or James Joyce doesn't find it worth his while to take the probably short time it would take to set the clock correctly.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of what's going on.
It's kind of, I guess it would take, I just took an impression. And my impression was that they couldn't afford a proper clock. And the clock runs maybe 10 minutes spray a day, and they haven't set it for a week. You know, so he says, "What's the fastest?" Other people, I remember there was a habit in my neighborhood. People deliberately set their clocks wrongly. So my mother used to set our clock to be about 5 minutes or 10 minutes ahead of the real time, as a way of compensating for the children always being a bit late. You know,
Yes.
you just.
But there is another.
You never knew the time, because you never knew who had put it right and how. You know, in this house, I'm just thinking in that house, they just don't know who has last set the clock, and the clock probably is a bargain basement model.
There is another phenomenon here where in Irish public houses, the clock is usually set about 10 minutes later than the correct time, so that when the publican calls time, it won't come as such a shock to the customers, and he would then get them out on time.
Yes, well, they feel that the publican is being very liberal with them.
Correct.
Okay. There's a couple other things in here that indicate.
The description of the family home is awful, isn't it?
Yes.
The yellow dripping and the jar and the pawn tickets. I mean, they pawned the man's pants.
Yeah, one pair. Yeah.
Fascinating.
And you see the name,
Yeah,
Yeah.
Daly or McAvoy.
Daly or McAvoy, they're giving a false name.
Mm-hmm. There you
So,
go.
Oh, that's their name. I thought that was the pawnbroker's name.
Yeah.
No,
the,
it's
the
an
pledger.
assumed name for the purpose of the pawnbroker.
Got it.
Yeah.
So if I go in, I give a phony name when I pledge
Yeah.
something. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm.
Otherwise, it might look bad for the neighbors.
Yeah, because when your neighbor goes in and sees your name,
Yeah.
you know, so
For shame.
perhaps I don't know, but terrible poverty, all right, and you know, you can.
How much they dropped down. They went from having staff,
Yeah.
you know, could go down to drinking. You know, people might lose their home or something, but they're
Yeah.
drinking out of jam jars. It's
Drinking
phenomenal.
out of jam jars, and that house on Brighton Square, you know, like that was the kind of a really good area of Dublin. Like that was all full of
Mm.
people who own businesses and stockbrokers and those sort of guys.
Yeah.
It's still a very, very good house. And
Yeah.
then to be down to that.
Horrendous.
Yeah,
Eat and
and
drink.
Yes.
Oh.
Drink, yeah.
These are all basic things that they've pawned. Just
Yeah.
nothing
Yeah.
fancy, you know.
Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
the D coat? I thought the D coat could have been a dress coat. What's a D coat?
Sounds like a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah. Articles in white.
Underwear?
Yeah.
Yeah, what's white?
Three articles in white, maybe three white articles. I really have no idea.
In white. So it's 3 articles and a white shirt or.
Mm.
Yeah.
So here's a real minute question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So I get the impression Dublin was not that big
No.
Yeah.
at the time. And so I assumed that actually the pawnbroker knew who was actually pawning the
obviously.
article.
I'd imagine
Right.
so. Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that the pawnbroker was colluding with the pledger
Yeah.
to keep their identity hid by using an alternate name.
Correct.
I guess so.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's a very important, I mean, in some ways, that's a very telling detail about
Yeah.
the dynamics within the city, that kind of
Yeah.
everybody knows a little something about everybody else, but there's still this attempt to keep things veiled as much as possible.
Yeah, that is that an unusual item in sociology? You know, do groups of people do that, or was it peculiar to us?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but certainly there'd be the things that you knew and the things that you knew you were not supposed to know. You know, those kind of.
Right, and I would assume that a certain amount of respect for a person would be based upon how discreet they
Yeah.
could
Yes.
be.
Mm.
That if
Yeah.
you were a person that knew someone's not so savory details but kept it to yourself,
Yeah.
I would think that someone would trust you more, would
Yeah, and
give you,
more likely to reciprocate if you had need.
Mm.
yeah.
The
Yeah,
pawnbroker, of course, now has developed into what we know as the loan shark.
oh yeah,
And that is a great, I think that's a sort of worldwide phenomenon.
yeah.
But it clearly is a great trial for people who get into financial difficulty, because with the rates that are charged, they find it very difficult to break the cycle and get ahead. You know, Joe will know that and Anne will know that we have an organization here in Ireland called Vincent de Paul, who help the poor.
We
But,
have that here.
You have that there as well, okay.
Yes.
But
It's here too.
there is a friend of mine who works in that organization. He is now helping through 3 generations of same families who just can't break the poverty cycle. So this is where the Joyces were heading
Yeah.
in this book.
Yeah, and I think that Joyce listed what they, listed what they had pawned to show how low they had gone down, how poor they were, because they didn't have anything else to pawn.
Yeah.
They had
Exactly.
nothing decent.
Yeah. I mean,
So
it's really,
he does a very economical job, just in this short little bit that I read, at providing details of the family. I mean, almost right from the very first sentence, he drained his 3rd cup of watery
Watery.
to the dregs, and
Crust
set
the bread.
the crust of fried bread.
Mhm.
So,
They weren't even on a plate.
And the bread would have been fried because it was stale.
Yeah.
and because oil, to fry something in oil and eat it, fills your stomach for longer.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Let us proceed on.
It's me, isn't it? Yep. His mother straightened the battered alarm clock that was lying on its side in the middle of the mantelpiece until its dial showed 12:15, and then laid it once more on its side. 1 hour and 25 minutes, she said. The right time now is 10:20. The dear knows you might try to be in time for your lectures. Fill out the place for me to wash, said Stephen. Katie, fill out the place for Stephen to wash. Rudy, fill out the place for Stephen to wash. I can't. I'm going for blue. Fill it out, you, Maggie. When the enamelled basin had been fitted into the well of the sink and the old washing glove flung on the side of it, he allowed his mother to scrub his neck and root into the folds of his ears and into the interstices at the wings of his nose. Well, it's a poor case, she said, when a university student is so dirty that his mother has to wash him. But it gives you pleasure, Stephen said calmly. An ear-splitting whistle was heard from upstairs, and his mother thrust a damp overall into his hand, saying, "Dry yourself and hurry out for the love of goodness." A second shrill whistle, prolonged angrily, brought one of the girls to the foot of the staircase. "Yes, father?" "Is your lazy bitch of a brother gone out yet?" Yes, father." "Sure?" "Yes, father." The girl came back, making signs to him to be quick and to go out quietly by the back. Stephen laughed and said, "He's a curious idea of genders, if he thinks a bitch is masculine." "It's a scandalous shame for you, Stephen," said his mother. "And you'll live to rue the day you set foot in that place. I know how it has changed you." "Good morning, everybody," said Stephen, smiling and kissing the tips of his fingers in adieu. I'll stop there.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. All right. Lots here.
Yeah.
What could you say?
Yeah. I can say that the clock question got answered pretty thoroughly.
Yes. Good point. Good point. An hour and 25 minutes.
But there's a scene, the scene of the mother washing his hair or whatever it is she's washing is nice. It shows, the love of the children and their mother.
Yeah.
And so that's what they have left, I guess.
Yeah.
That's about all they have left.
An enameled
And the
basin.
father remains in isolation, doesn't he? He stays upstairs until
Yeah.
Stephen is gone. He doesn't
Yes.
want to face him. And that could be embarrassment on the father's part,
Yeah.
or maybe he doesn't want to cause embarrassment for Stephen because of how low he has become.
Yeah.
There's quite a lot going on, as you said.
And we
Yeah.
he still wants to seem like he's the boss of the family because they might
Yeah.
disrespect him a little bit.
And the girls sort of gathering round to protect him.
Mm.
You know, one
Mhm.
tells a lie for him,
Mm-hmm.
and the other says, "Go the back way." Or is that the same girl? It's the girl, the same girl.
Mhm.
If this is Joyce, what age was he when he went to university? I think he was 16 when he went to university first.
I would assume 16 or 17, but I
So
don't know.
he's kind of big enough to be able to wash himself, you know.
You would think. I mean, if he's 14,
Well-
he's old enough to wash himself. If he's
Yeah, it's
10,
not like
he's
he's-
old enough to wash
yeah.
himself.
Yeah, it's not like he's 3 years of age, you
Yeah.
know.
I think he likes the personal attention he gets from that.
Yeah, I think so too.
I
That
think
comment,
I think the mother probably likes it also.
Yeah.
hmm
I think one of the great phrases there is when the mother says to Stephen, "You live to rue the day you set your foot in that
Yeah.
place." I'm sure she's talking about university.
University.
Yeah, I assume so.
He's clearly the first one to go to university.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they would have a sort of a jaundiced view of the value of going to university.
Yeah.
I can say that from bitter experience because when it came my time to go to university, which is only 1970, I know my parents would have considered that I was wasting my time.
Yeah.
And that if I was to fund this, I would have to fund it myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, granted, they were very happy to turn up for my conferring.
Yes, I'm proud.
Yes, very proud.
Joyce's, but her husband went to university here in Cork.
Yes.
Simon.
Yeah.
Simon.
John.
Okay.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did. He was in medicine
Medicine. Yeah.
here. No,
Did
obviously
you
didn't
finish that, Anne?
No, I think he was a bit like Joyce himself.
Yeah.
And he liked to having a good time. And then from what I heard, he got in with kind of like Sinn Féin, that type of crowd. So his mother
with the
brought
bad
him
crowd.
to Dublin. They were very, very wealthy. His father had died.
Yeah.
They owned most of Cork. I have done a walking tour of the area that what they owned, and he was an only child, so he would have inherited all of that, and that was the properties that he was selling when he came down to Cork. Did you ever hear of Dr. Flicker? Dr. Flicker. Yeah, Dr. Flicker Small. Have you ever heard of her? She does walking tours around the city.
Yes.
She did her doctorate on the food in Ulysses. So I did a walking tour with her.
Okay.
It's fascinating. And then, which is quite sad, when he went to Dublin, John Joyce, he just continued on the way he was here in Cork. And his mother came back to Cork and she is buried. And I have been to that graveyard, but there's no headstone or anything on it. They don't know where, which place she is, which is quite sad.
They'd probably spent all the money at that time. Or enough of the money he didn't want to spend it on a headstone for his mother.
Sure.
But let me ask you, Anne, why did the mother and the son move from Cork?
She thought that she would take him away from the crowd here in Cork by bringing him to Dublin, and she must have known somebody in Dublin to stay with them.
Okay. So he was already, she wanted to rescue him.
On a downward spiral, I guess.
Okay.
It's sad. But the Cork initially was just mainly medicine in the university, and I was actually at a thing on the 16th of June, they had it, where he would have went to college in that section, the medical building.
Yeah, and
They had
we had
music.
that earlier chapter when the son and father went to Cork, and he was
To sell
showing
the
him,
property, some of the properties.
And all this.
showing the, didn't he show him
Oh
in
yeah,
the
he went back. That's right. He went back
Back
to
to
UCC.
school.
Yeah,
carving on the desktop?
Mhm.
And is my memory
right.
correct that the
Yeah.
word fetus was carved in the desktop, or is it done
Yeah.
making that?
That's right. Yeah, that's what he found.
Okay.
We see the way the girls, the three sisters, you know, fill it out, and one shouts Katie and Rudy, and you do it, Maggie. I'm going for blue means I'm very busy. But the girls shout the job across one to the other, three sisters. So, you know.
Is this in the age hierarchy here by any chance? Does anybody know that?
Well, yeah, you could imagine it like stairs.
Going for blue also means going for blue powder, which would be washing powder.
Oh, yes.
Oh. Well, that's interesting.
Right.
I think
Yeah,
washing powder is still blue.
according to the annotated version, it's Dublin slang for I'm working as hard as I can.
Okay.
So kind of like, I can't do it because I'm already busy. But
Yeah.
I think all those explanations sound like they could be all three
Yeah.
still work.
Yeah.
But I think that next sentence where he tells his mother, but it gives you pleasure, is he's projecting onto his mother the reason he's asking his mother. And probably the reason he remains so dirty is because his mother has a reason to lay her hands on him.
Mm.
Because the description of how she washes him is really thorough. I mean,
Yeah.
he allowed his mother to scrub his neck and root into the folds of his ears and into the interstices at the wings of his nose.
That's thorough.
That's pretty thorough.
I can just see her doing it. Kind of rough and lots of energy put into it.
A lot of energy, yeah.
You'd get your ears done as well in that sort of a washing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the next sentence is really, really interesting. Well, it's a poor case, she said, when a university student is so dirty that his mother has to wash him.
Yeah.
So she's actually expressing some pride in him being a university student, which she's going to contradict
Yes.
very soon.
But she's also saying that she's in charge. She's the mother of the house. She's the matriarch. And the father is nowhere to be seen at this point until we discover he's upstairs.
Yeah.
So there's a certain measure of control there, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But isn't that the way mothers are? They manage to say both sides of the coin at once, you know.
Yeah.
Like both can be true and yet appear to contradict, you know, but don't in their mind. So I know I'm not supposed to have read the end of the chapter yet, but it's a long way from this atmosphere to the university, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is.
Like, you know,
And you
living
actually,
through-
Joe, you can refer to anywhere in the book in
yeah,
our conversation here, because
yeah,
part of what
Yeah.
we're doing here is encouraging a reading that goes through the whole book and then folds back on itself.
and that walk he does after this to get there is a very long walk, and it's sort of almost a metaphor for the distance between the two lives he leads, one in home and one in university, perhaps. I don't know, maybe I'm losing the run of myself.
No, it sounds great. How long a walk is it?
Is he going from Brighton Square, Joe?
No, he's going from, what do you call that place on the north side that they were in?
Beacon Street?
No, my head is very very bad for names, but he's near the canal on the north side. He's near the Royal Canal, and he's going to
Okay.
walk all the way to Stephen's Green. You know, to
Yeah, that's a good walk. Yeah.
it's a good walk. Like
Yeah.
the whole of the back at the custom house there. You know, what's that road called?
Is it Fairview?
Yeah, the Fairview again, and North Strand, the whole North
Oh,
Strand,
yeah.
and then across the bridge, and then up. you
Yeah,
know,
that's a hell of a walk.
It
So
is
we're
for,
talking
for
an
a guy
hour?
who's late, and
Easy.
know,
Oh, easy. Okay.
and it's not that it lacks tram service. You know, it's obviously
Can't afford that.
a luxury.
No.
Mm.
Hmm.
He starts off by passing St. Vincent's Lunatic Asylum on
Yeah.
Convent Avenue. That's where his walk begins.
That's where the walk begins.
So
I
how
think it's-
far would you say that was when you say a long way?
At least
It's-
an hour.
At least a mile?
An hour.
An hour.
Oh, an hour.
An hour's walk.
An hour's walk at a good pace. That's more than, several miles. Could be 3 miles.
Could be 3 miles, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well,
Where's the lunatic asylum, man? Where you said Convent
This is
Road.
just in the, yeah, that's what it says here. The nuns were in charge of St. Vincent's Lunatic Asylum
That
on
doesn't mean
Convent
anything.
Avenue.
I presume
On
that's all
Convent
gone.
Avenue.
Yeah.
Must
Look-
be, yeah.
let's go ahead and read a little bit further then. 'Cause
Okay. Where am I?
So we're starting right after good morning,
The
everybody.
lane behind the terrace. Yeah.
Mhm.
The lane behind the terrace was waterlogged, and as he went down it slowly, choosing his steps amid heaps of wet rubbish, he heard a mad nun screeching in the nuns' madhouse behind the wall. Jesus, oh Jesus, Jesus. He shook the sound out of his ears by an angry toss of his head and hurried on, stumbling through the moulding offal, his heart already bitten by an ache of loathing and bitterness. His father's whistle, his mother's mutterings, the screech of an unseen maniac were to him now so many voices, offending and threatening to humble the pride of his youth. He drove their echoes even out of his heart with an expectation, but as he walked down the avenue and felt the grey morning light falling about him through the dripping trees and smelt the strange wild smell of the wet leaves and bark, his soul was loosened of her miseries. The rain-laden trees of the avenue evoked in him, as always, memories of the girls and women in the plays of Gertrude Hauptmann, and the memory of their pale sorrows, and the fragrance falling from the wet branches, mingled in a mood of quiet joy. His morning walk across the city had begun, and he foreknew that as he passed the sloplands of Fairview, he would think of the cloistral silver-veined prose of Newman. That as he walked along the North Strand Road, glancing idly at the windows of the provision shops, he would recall the dark humour of Guido Cavalcanti and smile. That as he went by Bard's stone-cutting works in Talbot Place, the spirit of Isbin would blow through him like a keen wind, a spirit of wayward boyish beauty, and that passing a grimy mariner dealer's shop beyond the Liffey, he would repeat the song by Ben Jonson, which begins, I will not weary where I lie. Now, do you want to stop there, or do you want to go on another bit?
That's actually quite a bit. Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot right there.
Absolutely,
me,
how he handles.
Sorry, Anne. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, no, I was just saying how he handles everything. The minute she leaves, he's gone. He forgets about it.
I think there's such a change in tone here. This is what I think you would refer to as purple prose. This is pure poetry, the way he's describing the atmosphere and so on. And just going back to locations, the Joyce family address at the time was 8 Royal Terrace in Fairview. And this lunatic asylum was also in Fairview. So we're certainly right about the distance that he would have had to walk to get to university. But going back, I think those couple of paragraphs there are pure poetry. And they sound gorgeous when they're read loud.
Mm-hmm. pure poetry, and the beginning of it is horrifying.
Sorry, Duncan, say that again?
The beginning of it is horrifying.
Yes.
That whole description there as he leaves the house. The lane behind the terrace was waterlogged.
Mhm.
So it's a
Yeah.
low spot. And he went down it slowly, choosing his steps amid heaps of wet rubbish.
Mhm.
He heard a mad nun screeching in the nun's madhouse beyond the wall. Jesus! Oh, Jesus! This is almost worthy of Dante in some senses.
Yeah.
I
Is it-
Well, he
mean,
does mention Guido. Dante's
yeah,
friend.
Guido Cavalcanti.
Are the nuns the residents of the madhouse, or are they in charge of the madhouse?
I'd say they were both.
Or both?
I think it's both.
I actually thought it was the madhouse for nuns.
Yeah.
That would be
I
very
don't think
special.
I don't think it's limited to nuns. I don't think there's
No,
a specific place for mad nuns.
But the Sisters of Charity.
No, the nuns were in charge of St. Vincent's Lunatic Asylum.
Yeah.
And they were also in charge of the lunatic nuns that they had.
Presumably it's a nun that's shouting the holy name. Although maybe not.
Mm. You might be having an epiphany, you know?
Oh yeah, he heard a mad nun. So it's one
Yeah.
mad nun. Yeah.
But he doesn't know it's a nun. He hears a voice.
Well, but if he thinks it's a mad nun, he's either imagining it or he does know that there are mad nuns in there.
Yeah.
Right.
Of course, he maybe has not been in residence for so long as to have understood the neighborhood fully either, you know. So he's asking the question too. Yeah.
Well, he might have decided it was a mad nun because of the screaming of the name of Jesus.
Yeah, it's a female using the holy name. So yeah,
Female using a holy name, and
Yeah.
for dramatic purposes, if that female using the holy name was a mad nun, I mean that's pretty dramatic.
Yes.
If it was a Dubliner, he would have been shouting Jesus as opposed to Jesus.
Jesus.
Somebody mentioned earlier that this was low-lying land, which it was at the time. He mentions slablands of Fairview, which is where the Talca River went out into the ocean. And all that area was infilled after the 1916 revolution from the detritus of the revolution, all the buildings that were knocked down.
Hmm.
Joe would know this as well, and Anne probably too, that there's St. Anne's Park out there now, which, you know, is a lovely green facility.
Yes.
Could be around that area off the North Strand. Have I that right, Joe? You're looking quizzically.
I'm
no.
trying to place it. I thought that was more towards Raheny, but forgive me, I don't know, you know.
Yeah.
But I was just thinking, as I was quizzically thinking myself, was, you know, Dublin was, as Duncan said, a very small place.
Yeah.
I remember the population of Dublin being under 250,000. And that was being in the 1960s.
Yes.
And so there might have been, let's say, 200,000 people.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
the canals, I mean, he's
They were
right.
the borders. Yeah.
The canals were the boundary, like Rathmines was outside the city.
Yes.
And so he's basically, they're living right at the edge, as you say, sloblands, and he's practically walking to the other canal. So
Correct.
you know, sorry, I'm talking about the walk.
just-
That's what I was thinking. I was just thinking, like, the place was not the big place we know now, where St. Anne's, I was thinking of Raheny when you said St. Anne's, like Raheny goes out many more times now. And
Yes.
they're living on the fringe.
I just noticed
I've
something
wondered.
which might solve our nun problem. His father's whistle, his mother's mutterings, the screech of an unseen maniac.
Mm-hmm.
Work,
Yeah.
do it, yeah. So why he's just said the nun, I don't know.
Well, there are three extremes, aren't they?
Mm.
Any one of those would be upsetting.
Right.
Yeah, offending. The
Offending.
pride of youth.
So
Pride of
let me ask you a
youth.
geography question, which is, so he walks out of the house into water,
Yeah,
and it's pretty well established this is a bad part of town.
Yeah.
I mean, run down part of town.
right.
So I don't know Dublin at all. I'm assuming that the walk from the Slav lands to Trinity University is on the incline for the most part.
Yes, you're going down to the River Liffey,
Down.
down. Well, a gradual incline, as Duncan said. And that's taking you to the river. You've got to cross the river then to get to college.
Yeah.
And you get to college by going up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
it starts to climb again.
Oh,
But it
Okay,
is
so you
very
go
gradual.
down,
The same would apply in reverse, obviously, if he's coming back from college.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
going up to get home.
Yeah. But it's very, very gradual. I'd
Yeah.
say if you were cycling, you wouldn't notice it.
yeah, well, that and where the water flows when it's
Where the
raining.
water would flow, yeah.
Yeah,
You know, because I've been involved in house building, and always a very important part of it is what's the water going to do when it rains?
correct. Yeah,
You know,
and make sure there's no
how,
water table.
how do you have to landscape around the house to keep the house from getting flooded? And how high off the ground do you need to construct the house
Yeah.
to keep water from getting into it?
Yeah.
And then
Yep.
that same principle is also true in the larger political, economic, social scene. It's a thing that poor people live in the lowlands, the
Yes.
swampy, watery. If bad things are going to happen, they're going to happen there areas.
Yeah.
The rich people and the rich institutions live a little elevated, so they don't have to worry too much.
Yeah.
So
That's right.
that's the only reason I bring that up.
Yeah. And then they have to
Sorry, Joe. Yeah,
go ahead.
even today, North Strand Road would not be the most salubrious place,
No.
certainly to be walking in the evening time,
Yeah.
because that takes you down to the Connolly Station where the railway is. So the housing there would be of very poor quality.
And you're passing Nighttown on
Yes.
your right as you walk. You know?
Yeah.
Between
He doesn't
Fairview
mention it. I don't
University,
think. Hmm?
between
Yeah.
between the area he's living in and the university.
Yeah,
passed
he would be, the road would be bordering Nighttown.
Oh,
But he doesn't dwell on it.
yeah, yeah.
But
yeah,
obviously that the business of that nature tends to occur where
Yeah.
rents are lower.
Yeah.
But then you've got the other water, you've the sea on the other side. So there's a lot of water around this story.
mhm.
No, that's only the river water and the rainwater and the mud and that, but the big blue is out there. It is water. I associate water references, say in a cinema, to water to be, the film begins with a lot of rain. It's a
Mhm.
symbol of emotion. I wonder,
Yeah.
was that true at the time of writing this? Does the water stand for emotional? Because the whistles were very upsetting, and the nun very emotional, and the mother's emotional.
Mhm. And look at the end of that paragraph. So we
no.
have Jesus, oh Jesus. Then we got all this stuff
Mhm.
where his father's whistle, his mother's muttering, blah blah blah. And then he drove their echoes even out of his heart with execration. But as he walked down the avenue and felt the gray morning light falling about him through the dripping trees and smelt the strange wild smell of wet leaves and bark, his soul was loosed of her miseries.
That's important.
Mhm.
So geography is playing a real, geography and physical environment playing a real important role. And, you know, it is interesting that he kind of uses a male pronoun and a female pronoun related to his soul in one phrase. His soul was loosed of her miseries.
Loosened of miseries.
That's unusual.
It's very curious.
Mhm.
Mm.
Never
You know,
noticed that. Yeah.
I didn't either.
It has to be deliberate. It has to be deliberate. This is not an accident that he
No.
did that.
And yet soul would be male and female, depending on who you're referring to.
Yeah.
Yes.
His
I just
soul.
I just wonder, has soul a bigger meaning
Well, you know,
in
the
fact that he's
the
using the
first
feminine?
his refers to Stephen, who's male,
Yes.
and then he seems to always use the female for his soul. So the soul, the first HIS is his refers to Stephen, and the second her refers to the soul. It's one reference to one soul. You know what I mean?
Mm.
He does that thing. I find that very irritating, that he gives a gender to the soul, you know, but sort of,
Well, Joe, maybe I should say this is how he would defend himself. He will say, well,
Yeah.
Joe, you may notice that I use the his and the her in the same phrase, trying to get across that the soul is both and more,
or none.
or none.
Yeah.
Screeching none.
N-U-N. Sorry, we're going to stop that. Very good.
Okay, so anyway, I think it's really wonderful how as he's walking
Yeah.
through the geography, how everything is changing.
Hmm.
And that kind of, you know, the inferno that he walks out into in the beginning starts dropping away to some degree. And I like how he is associating with different spots of land with different artists. Cavalcante. It's
I have a question about Newman. Is that John Cardinal Newman? Who is the
I think
Newman
so.
that's referred to? Just that's what I thought. I just wanted to know.
yeah, he was a big fan of Newman. He liked Newman a lot,
Mm.
at least in terms of Newman's skill in writing.
Just a piece of information that's totally by the way, where Newman House was on Stephen's Green, that has now become the Museum of Irish Literature,
Molly.
very much
Money.
headed up by Joyce.
You're talking about Molly.
Molly,
Music.
yeah.
Yeah,
Or,
yeah.
they call
Because
it
I
Molly
visited
themselves.
Molly, yeah. I
Molly.
visited, went for a visit there. And the tree is still there out the back.
The plane tree.
Mm.
Mhm.
Beautiful place.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's,
yeah,
And they
absolutely
do good
gorgeous.
coffee there as well.
Yep, had all that.
yeah.
So it's all waiting for you, Duncan, when you come to
and the shop.
You know, I'm ready to come, but I've got a couple of things have to happen in the
Okay.
world before I'm ready to launch out. And
Joe and myself and Anne will be waiting for you.
Oh, absolutely.
That's
And we're not excluding Louis or Joan either.
if I knew that I could get there and not have to come back, so
Well, that could be
things had
arranged.
settled down, I would I would be there next spring, but I don't think that's going to happen. So I will proceed more cautiously and with a emotional pain in my heart that I can't get there.
Yeah,
That's good.
That Museum of Literature Ireland, the building is several parts of it are preserved in the condition in which it was when it was the Royal University, including the what do you call the president's room, what would have been Newman's office with leather seats and scary place to be sort of going into, we have come to discuss your future, sort of thing.
You feel a certain amount of
your behavior last week at the, there's a class, there's one, they call it the classroom. There's one room restored like a Victorian classroom with furniture to match, the genuine furniture and so on. It's a fascinating place. If you do go on the tour. And that is, I remember it from when I was a student, kind of canteen. Over the years, we put on plays there and sort of stuff,
You must be really old.
How it survived the treatment it got at the hand of the inmates. They brought it back to its beauty.
Sure did.
All right. Perhaps we should go on. We're going from literature into philosophy and music and lots of stuff happening just in the next paragraph. Who's the next reader in this?
Lois.
Lois.
His mind was wearied of his search for the essence of beauty amid the spectral words of Aristotle or Aquinas, turned often for its pleasure to the dainty songs of the Elizabethans. His mind, in the vesture of a doubting monk, stood often in shadow under the windows of that age to hear the grave and mocking music of the lutanists or the frank laughter of waistcoateers until a laugh too low, a phrase tarnished by time, of chambering and false honor, stung his monkish pride and drove him on from his lurking place. The lore which he was believed to pass his days brooding upon, so that it had wrapped him from the companionship of youth, was only a garner of slender sentences from Aristotle's Poetics and Psychology and the Psychopsis Philosophiae Scholasticae ad Ventum Divi Toni. His thinking was a dusk of doubt and self-mistrust, lit up at moments by the lightnings of intuition, but lightnings of so clear a splendor that in those moments the world perished about his feet, as if it had been fire consumed. And thereafter his tongue grew heavy, and he met the eyes of others with unanswering eyes, for he felt that the spirit of beauty had folded him round like a mantle, and that in reverie at least he had been acquainted with nobility. But when this brief pride of silence upheld him no longer, he was glad to find himself still in the midst of common lives, passing on his way amid the squalor and noise and sloth of the city fearlessly and with a light heart. Thoughts, anyone?
He's brought us down from the high back to the low again, hasn't he?
Yes and no. This what Lois just read is so dense and so full and such a hoot that, when at least when I think of the fact that Joyce is in part writing about himself, to have this much understanding of your late teen personality is astounding. Like just on the first one. Okay, so let me reread. His mind was worried of its search for the essence of beauty in the spectral words of Aristotle or Aquinas, turned often for its pleasure to the dainty songs of Elizabethans.
I think it's amazing that at his age, he was searching for the essence of beauty. It seems like a much more sophisticated thought for a teenager.
Yet he's going to university at this point, isn't he?
Well, that's true.
He's on his way to university, so perhaps he was a little bit older. I'm not sure.
But he's very serious.
I mean, this would come within the study of philosophy or theology,
Yeah.
perhaps.
Don't kind of university students tend to repeat the lofty thoughts they've heard from their lecturers?
No.
So true.
I really worry about the calculation of the square root of -1, don't you? It's
All these years.
and we're not quite sure what the square root is, you know.
Well, I know my experience, even when I was going to university in the early years, and I entered university at 17,
Yeah.
not quite 18, and within 3 months I turned 18.
Yeah.
But in addition to my university studies and the books that I was supposed to read, what I actually read was stuff that I thought was more important,
Yes.
Yeah.
which tended to be lofty in that kind of adolescent sort of way. And I think in Stephen's case, remember, Stephen is a smart boy from a disreputable family.
Mhm.
And so if he at university, he's not going to be able to hang out very often with the rich kids
Right.
because he can't afford it, and they're going to make fun of his clothes and all that sort of thing. And he may have a few of the more modest and even poorer kids who also have this tendency towards intellectualizing that he has. But I
Yeah.
think as part of his defense, part of his social defense against the views of society towards him and his family was by aspiring to be lofty.
Yes.
Yes.
Very
Agreed.
good point. Yeah.
Yes.
That this was a
Very-
psychological defense,
Mhm.
as well as an interest of his. But, you know, I mean, fact of the matter, if he had had money, and this is a really outrageous statement I'm going to make, he could have been like his father. If he had had money, he could have been a good old boy out treating everybody to drinks and carousing on a regular basis. He couldn't do that.
Yeah.
No.
So in a way, he becoming an artist was something maybe the rich boys couldn't do, you know, that I could do. And as you say, a defense against them putting him in a box that was different from them.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
when we think of it like that, you know, it kind of, you've just described maybe Joyce throughout his whole life, you know.
We saw that in the scenes at Clongowes College as well, where they're swapping Latin phrases with each other, and
Oh yeah,
and he's on a level par with the rich guys, if you like.
yeah,
So it would have been important for him
yeah,
to be able to quote from Thomas Aquinas or
yeah,
Aristotle or whoever, you know.
yeah.
So maybe that was the stuff that you were reading, Duncan, you know,
Yeah,
getting deep into philosophy when you should have been doing your maths or whatever.
yeah.
I was into all kinds of things. I was into all kinds of things, and you know,
Very good.
and I still continue that pattern.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, and partially because I like it, and other parts is because I'm not a good old boy.
Yeah.
It's not in my, it's not, I'm not much of a glad hander. You know, I'm certainly not, I'm not a poor person, but I'm not a wealthy person. So that sort of temptation of that sort of life never even occurred to me at all.
Yeah.
But I've known a number of people, like my best friend, his father, he was from a small town in Texas. His father ran a automobile fix-it place and junk shop.
Yeah.
His father was a horse trader. And my friend from this little tiny town ended up becoming a classics student at the University of Texas.
Yeah.
And at that time, the classics department at the University of Texas was actually one of the best in the country.
Yeah.
And my friend went on to study, you know, he knew Greek,
Yeah.
he knew Hebrew,
Yeah.
he knew, you know, and even though his actual trade was, he was a part-time writer and he repaired houses. He would find a house and come in and repair it. His father-in-law would buy him a rundown house. He would move his family into it. He would spend 6 months repairing it, and then he would sell it for a profit and use that money to have a little bit of time to do his writing. But the whole time he was always reading Beckett and the classics and writing an actual football weapon story in a Greek drama fashion.
Yes.
So I just bring that up as another example of how I see Joyce, where Joyce is kind of doing the same thing.
See, that's ringing bells all over for me, because I'm at the stage now where we're coming to the 60th anniversary of my high school finishing, and you know, we're all retired and so on, but there's exactly that division within the group, because it was a fee-paying posh school, and lots of guys had more money than sense behind them, and then some guys had no money and loads of sense, and you can see the divide. And we're all equal now because we're retired, but some of us are more comfortably retired than others, you know. And yet we're all equal, and the one thing that made us equal was football. So, you know, if on a particular day 60 years ago when the ball came out to you and you dropped it, it doesn't matter how much money your dad has. It's still going to remind you. Do you remember that day? Do you remember the day you dropped the ball? You know, it's an equalization defense mechanism sort of going, and the arts will do fine too.
It sounds like you went to rugby school.
Oh, I sure did. Yeah, 11 years rugby, 5 times a week.
Wow.
I don't know if it was actually Kurt Vonnegut who said it, but somebody said it and I liked it. And he said, it's always high school.
There's always high school.
We never get beyond high school.
We never. True. And so 1 o'clock in the morning with the guys with several drams of whiskey on them, you know, like they're back in class, I can tell you, you know. And they're
that divide is very clear.
They're all about 4 years old. That's, you know, the rows break out about all these sort of things that, you know, kind of ridiculous.
It's funny that you mentioned reunions, Joe, because I've been to a number of them, and for my second level education, I went to the Christian Brothers School, and there was an A class and a B class. And of course, the A class looked down at the B class. And when we have the reunions, the guys in the B class all congregate together, and the A class guys don't come at all.
Yeah.
All right.
A, B, and a C, you know, A, B, and A look down on B, B look down on C, and C look down on both of them. You know?
All right. Well, you've called up one of my favorite jokes. So forgive me. I'm going to tell it to you.
Here we go.
It is a Harvard University class reunion.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, this is like 40 years later. And they're all there. And the highest graduate in the class is there. And then the guy who just barely made it is there. But the guy who just barely made it flies in his private jet. And he has his $3,000 Armani suit on him. So everybody's having a good time and they're, having drinks. And the valedictorian of the class comes up to the guy who just barely made it. And he said, I don't understand it, Bob. I graduated with the highest honors. And yet I'm not a huge success. And here you are, you fly in your private jet, you've got this Armani suit on, you've got these diamond rings on. How did you do it? So Bob says, he says, well, Bill, I don't know. He said, all I know is I buy things for $1 and I sell them, and I sell a lot of them for $3. And he said, it's just amazing how much you can make with a 3% profit.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Very good.
That's it in a nutshell. Do you know what I sorry now, Duncan, put me right if I'm doing the wrong thing here. I'm going back to the start, and we noticed one pair of men's pants.
Mm-hmm.
It just crossed my mind, how many times pants comes up in Joyce's life as a problem. Here we have it on a ticket. In Ulysses and Telemachus, the row seems to include having Buck Mulligan's pants, to hand-me-down pants.
Right, the gray pants.
Not being able to wear them because they've got a gray stripe, but he can kill his mother,
Mm-hmm.
There's some other one as well, and then I can't remember the one in Ulysses. Another pair of pants floating around Ulysses, and then he has this problem with in Zurich with the English consulate over the English Players Theatre that he operated with them, and what's the name? Henry Carr. Who was an amateur actor, wanted to be paid for a pair of pants he bought for the performance, and they ended up in court over it. And it just, men's trousers keep coming up in his life. And now we find them at the start.
I can see a doctoral thesis coming up.
Yes.
Possibly a lot of ink has been spilt on this somewhere already, but it's just kind of, the point you made, like it's everything is high school, that brought it to my mind. One pair of pants, one men's pants, and he seems to think that's worth a row at every stage of his life.
But I think that reflects his background and circumstances. You would not have had a new pair of pants unless you were very well off. So it would have been all hand-me-downs. The mother would have been expected to amend sizes and turn up trousers and so on.
Yeah.
So it could have been something that weighed on Joyce's mind.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's where I'm trying to find the words. Yeah, that he put them. That did this play on his mind?
Didn't Molly used to hire out clothes, and in one of the episodes, the pants was too small.
There we go. Yeah. What's his name? Blah, blah, blah.
I know.
Ben Dollard's she's laughing at Ben Dollard's for having tight pants. That's Molly. You know that maybe that's different from what you're thinking. In which case we've just found 2 more cases.
Yeah.
That's a kind of it doesn't get us anywhere, but it just sort of.
Is that a good point to pick it up?
Yeah, well, you know
Continue
what
reading.
what I will probably do later on. One of the nice things about the Kindle books is I can actually go to my complete works of James Joyce, and I can type in pants in the find feature. And how many occurrences of the word pants there are, and where they occur, and we'll have links to each one of them. So
yeah, and so try trousers as well.
Put trousers in as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway.
Okay. I think it's me, is it?
Lots of fun at
Yes.
It's a funny. I think it's right.
Near the hoardings of
Okay.
the canal, he met the Sorry, we're good. Near the hoardings on the canal, he met the consumptive man with the doll's face and the brimless hat coming towards him down the slope of the bridge with little steps, tightly buttoned into his chocolate overcoat and holding his furled umbrella a span or 2 from him like a divining rod. It must be 11, he thought, and peered into a dairy to see the time. The clock in the dairy told him that it was 5 minutes to 5. But as he turned away, he heard the clock somewhere near him, but unseen, beating 11 strokes in swift precision. He laughed as he heard it, for it made him think of McCann, and he saw him a squat figure in a shooting jacket and breeches, and with a fair goatee, standing in the wind at Hopkins' corner, and heard him say, "Dedalus, you're an antisocial being, wrapped up in yourself. I'm not. I'm a Democrat, and I'll work and act for social liberty and equality among all classes and sexes in the United States of Europe of the future." 11. Then he was late for that lecture too. What day of the week was it? He stopped at a newsagent's to read the headline of a placard. Thursday, 10 to 11 English, 11 to 12 French, 12 to 1 physics. He fancied to himself the English lecture and felt, even at that distance, reckless and helpless. He saw the heads of his classmates meekly bent as they wrote in their notebooks the points that were bidden to note, nominal definitions, essential definitions, and examples or dates of birth or death, chief works, a favourable and an unfavourable criticism side by side. His own head was unbent, for his thoughts wandered abroad, and whether he looked around the little class of students or out of the window across the desolate gardens of the green, an odour assailed him of cheerless cellar damp and decay. Another head than his, right before him in the first benches, was poised squarely above its bending fellows, like the head of a priest, appealing without humility to the tabernacle for the humble worshippers about him. Why was it that when he thought of Cranley, he could never raise before his mind the entire image of his body, but only the image of the head and face? Even now, against the grey curtain of the morning, he saw it before him like the phantom of a dream, the face of a severed head or death mask, crowned on the brows by its stiff black upright hair as by an iron crown. It was a priest-like face, priest-like in its pallor, and the wide-winged nose in the shadowings below the eyes and along the jaws, priest-like in the lips that were long and bloodless and faintly smiling. And Stephen, remembering swiftly how he had told Cranley of all the tumults and unrests and longings in his soul day after day and night after night, only to be answered by his friend's listening silence, would have told himself that it was the face of a guilty priest who heard confessions of those whom he had not power to absolve, but that he felt again in memory the gaze of its dark womanish eyes. Oh, that's heavy duty.
That is heavy duty.
Now, Lewis, please discuss.
Say that again?
I said, Lewis, please discuss.
Well, that sounds like the worst English class anybody ever had.
Absolutely.
Really, the worst English class in the world.
I have a question. Did James Joyce have a scholarship to the university?
I don't think so. I've never heard it.
Don't know.
How did you have to pay for university at that time?
Yeah, you did. Yeah, yeah. He won a competition in schools throughout Ireland for essay writing. He got first place.
Right.
I'm thinking now of Ellman when I was reading it, but there was never any question of that converting into a monetary advantage. I just, like, his father was not penniless at that stage.
I'm sorry for cutting. I'm trying to remember something. Wasn't Joyce walking up and down outside some pub while his father was inside negotiating something for him to go to college? Or do you remember that? And then he walked off. We came across it earlier.
Didn't we read something like that already?
Yeah, we did, Joan. Did his father negotiate some deal?
I don't remember.
Oh, you're talking about.
Do you remember this episode where his father is in the pub talking with somebody, and Joyce is walking up and down outside?
I remember envisioning him standing there. I remember doing that, but I don't remember if that wasn't a different incident where he was going to bring him home or something, bring his father home.
No.
Well, of course, there's a scene with one of the girls who went there. It seems to me.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, if university cost money, he did win that essay thing, but I believe he blew all that money.
Yeah.
Treating his family. Some reason he thought he would never run out of money. Probably.
Yeah, he was giving them loans. He ran a little bank.
Yeah, I think kind of a parallel with his father's situation, where his father never dreamed that he could run out of money, and then of course he ran out of money.
Yeah.
So,
his father had a job. Like he was a local tax collector.
at this time.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he eventually lost it, and some difficulties arose about taxes that had been collected, but they didn't seem to have received the remittances.
Mm-hmm.
That's at that point he had nothing. But at the time he started going to university, he certainly was working in Dublin Corporation Rates Collection Office.
That the father was. Is it
Yeah.
possible that the children of corporation members would get a lighter tuition or anything like that?
No.
I think it was too early for that.
Really, there was very little in the line of scholarship around.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
The best bet would be Father Conmee, the Jesuits that were basically the Royal University. The Royal University was a strange place. It granted degrees, and it held examinations, and it gave lectures, but it didn't apparently have set courses, which I've never really understood. So it was a kind of place you might have somehow, if you knew someone, you might have gone in for nothing, all right. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I haven't got my Ellman handy. I don't know the answer.
Okay. Well, once again, we had this thing right in the middle of that paragraph about the desolate gardens of the Greens. We have another example of the physical environment affecting Stephen Dedalus tremendously. Where we have right in the middle of there, have he looked around the little class of students and out of the, this is all in his imagination, right? He's imagining the class. He's not really there. So in his imagination, he looked around the little class of students and out of the window across the desolate gardens of the green. An odor assailed him of cheerless cellar, damp and decay.
Yeah.
So he really has this tremendous ongoing response to his environment. So it seems to me.
Yeah.
And then someone help me out with this whole Cranley thing.
You know, I'd like to talk about Cranley.
Okay.
I have finished reading the chapter. And up until I finished reading the chapter, I really didn't like Cranley at all. He's a pain in the ass. He's critical. He's always butting in. He's just, and I don't know what bug does he have up his, he's just been horrible. And then when you get to the end of the story, Cranley is really making some very good points as Stephen is explaining where he is in his faith and his ethos and his philosophy. And Cranley is asking the right questions and Cranley is giving the right information. And it's a total turnaround. So I'm mentioning it now because here's Cranley.
Okay.
And this whole idea of the priest who can't absolve, a guilty priest who heard confessions of those whom he had not power to absolve, but that he felt again in memory the gaze of the dark woman in his eyes. And Cranley, he did make confessions to Cranley. He told Cranley a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
And Cranley, in a way, is a bit of a priest in that when it comes to the crisis of Stephen deciding what he's doing with his life and how he's going to treat all of those things he's leaving, it's Cranley who's trying to pull him back. Cranley is saying, well, would you do this? Would you do that? You're not really as cold about this as you think. You have inherent in you these beliefs and these prejudices and these superstitions which you claim you don't have.
Okay.
Enough from me.
No, it's good points that you're bringing up.
Yeah.
And I think that this part of it is directly related. This image that Stephen has of Cranley here is a very important thing. And I think this disembodiment of Cranley, I think Stephen is making a very strong point here where he's basically saying Cranley as an intellect is outstanding, except for the fact he doesn't have a body.
Explain.
He's pure intellect.
Okay.
Well,
He's not connected to the earth. You know, that why was it that when he thought of Cranley, he could never raise before his mind the entire image of his body, but only the image of the head and face? Now, even now, against the gray curtain of the morning, he saw it before him like the phantom of a dream, the face of a severed head or death mask. Blah 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 blah. And remember, this is coming from a guy, from Stephen Dedalus, who, as he's walking, walks out of the house. And he's listening to the nuns screaming, and then he goes through the landscape, and his mood is being strongly affected by where he is. There's a certain place where he thinks of Guido Cavalcanti and sort of thing that Cavalcanti has. There's Ibsen, And then he ends up with, I think, Ben Jonson,
Hmm.
who my impression is Ben Jonson was a very earthy guy. So my point is that Joyce is demonstrating here that while he's thinking all of these thoughts, he still has his feet planted on the ground. And he's still in contact with his physical and social environment.
Cranley was a name that Joyce used for his close friend, a guy called John Francis Byrne.
Mm-hmm.
And his relationship sunders in this chapter. But apparently they make it up and become good friends again about a year later. But in the portrait, or a portrait, Joyce continues Cranley in that mode that we understand him to be now, rather than sort of a friend of Joyce as a character in his own right, which may very well fit in with what you're saying, Duncan, that, you know, he's a fictive character.
Yeah.
I temporarily think that Cranley is the strong symbol of the disconnected intellect.
Okay.
Right.
Working with abstract thoughts, and that he's incredibly good at that. Just like he's really good. I believe he's the one who speaks Latin, that he and
Yes.
Joyce exchange Latin together,
Right.
while the other guys have no idea what they're talking. It's almost like a secret language
Yeah.
between them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's nobody else is competent in it except
Yeah.
probably the priest.
John, yeah.
But
John. Yeah. Well,
so at least for the moment, that's where I have Cranley.
yeah.
It's really smart.
And he's, as Donald says, very important. He lived in 7 Eccles Street, John Byrne.
Okay.
As you're beginning to see the centrality, and he's the guy who persuaded him, advised him about Nora. When, what's the other character that was
Yeah,
rumored that he had been, you know, she wasn't working.
spreading rumors that
Tonight she was
Nora
with
wasn't
me.
faithful, blah blah blah.
Yeah, and John Byrne is the guy who told him, you know, don't believe a word of that. It's none of it true. Actually, I think encouraged him to elope with her.
Okay.
And so there's, you know, he's partially a model for Bloom as well. You know, obviously. So it's a difficult relationship to understand from what we're reading now. I think you've got it right, Duncan, you know, in what you're saying. That explains it.
Yeah.
He
Actually,
died in New York in 1960. Cranley died in New York. So
I've got his autobiography on my shelf over here from the University of Texas, which has been sitting on my shelf for probably 8 months now. So maybe I'll get it off the shelf and look at it between now and the next meeting.
yeah.
But
Is that the strange book? I don't know. Let's not go there.
yeah, I've heard that it's a very unusual book.
Yeah, it kind of suggests to the United States Navy a method of.
He
Maybe
did some deciphering some code thing.
Yeah, he had an unbreakable code that would be of value to the Navy.
Trying to sell to the U.S. Navy.
Yeah,
and he never succeeded doing it, but yeah, this is Cranley we're talking about.
Yeah, and in between all this kind of stuff, there's the most amazing comments about Joyce, you know, that are from the horse's mouth. It's fantastic.
Yeah, but the fact that Cranley did Byrne was able to do, and apparently the code was a very good code, just kind of shows the kind of intellect that he had. That when it came to
there you go. We're back to intellect. Yeah.
So, all righty.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, I think this image of Cranley as a head is important. as an insight into Joyce's mind.
Yeah, the symbol of the intellect.
So I think the time is moving along pretty quickly here. Maybe Joan, I don't believe you've read yet. Am I
No,
correct?
that's okay.
Does everybody have a little more time? Maybe another 10, 15 minutes?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Joan, take it away.
We
Okay,
can't
well,
exclude John.
what's that?
I said we can't exclude you.
Oh, God forbid. A little note before I start reading.
Can I
Yeah.
found it. I'm sorry, Joan, to cut across you. I found where I got that info, and it's in chapter 4. A full hour had passed since his father had gone in with Dan Crosby, the tutor, to find out for him something about the university. For a full hour, he had paced up and down, waiting, but he could wait no longer, so he went off for a walk. So I assume that this person was able to get him in to the university.
I looked while you were talking about Cranley. I went into Elman to try to see if I could find anything there, and I did not find any mention of.
It's in page 126.
Yeah.
Well spotted.
All
I
right.
was beginning to think I dreamt it.
Well, you may have done that too.
Nobody else had any memory of it.
Through this image, he had a glimpse of a strange dark cavern of speculation, but at once turned away from it, feeling that it was not yet the hour to enter it. But the nightshade of his friend's listlessness seemed to be diffusing in the air around him, a tenuous and deadly exhalation, and he found himself glancing from one casual word to another on his right or left in stolid wonder that they had been so silently emptied of instantaneous sense until every mean shop legend bound his mind like the words of a spell, and his soul shriveled up, sighing with age as he walked on in a lane among heaps of dead language. His own consciousness of language was ebbing from his brain and trickling into the very words themselves, which set to band and disband themselves in wayward rhythms. The ivy winds upon the wall, and winds and twines upon the wall. The ivy winds upon the wall, the yellow ivy on the wall. Ivy, ivy, up the wall. Did anyone ever hear such drivel? Lord Almighty. Who ever heard of ivy whining on a wall? Yellow ivy, that was all right. Yellow ivory also. And what about ivory ivy? The words shone in his brain clearer and brighter than any ivory sawn from the mottled tusks of elephants. Ivory, I don't speak French. Ivoire, avorio, abur. One of the first examples that he had learned in Latin had run, India mittit aber. He recalled the shrewd northern face of the rector who had taught him to construe the metamorphoses of Ovid in a courtly English made whimsical by the mentions of porkers and pottards and chines of bacon. He had learned what little he knew of the laws of Latin verse from a ragged book written by a Portuguese priest. Contrahit orator variant in carmine vatis. That's enough.
Okay. And that last verse is translated as speakers summarize, poets transform in their verses.
Actors.
Okay.
Personally, find it interesting that after his whole thing about Cranley, where, as I said, I kind of infer that this means Cranley was a head person, then Stephen, the character, goes into all this stuff about words, which is also pretty much just head stuff.
That is a little rhyme, shall we call it, that is said outside the book. I've heard that many times before. People, it must be a what would you call it? Just one of those little verses that's passed around in
A popular verse.
Yeah, popular verse. Yeah.
Well, let me see. That's that. Moon dealer. You probably have some little something severed head. Oh yeah, here's I'm surprised the annotation does not say anything.
Probably find it in the computer. Just type in the first line.
Okay. Yeah, for some reason there's no note there. There's a nice long note about Cranley, though, which I will read.
Yeah.
Cranley derives his name from Thomas Cranley, a monk of the Carmelite order who succeeded to the Archbishopric of Dublin in 1397, but did not arrive in Ireland until October 1398. He was also Lord Chancellor of Ireland. The combination in one man of church and state authority implies yet another English betrayal of Ireland. Stephen and Cranley are estranged between the time of a portrait and Ulysses. It also says Stephen envisions Cranley as John the Baptist. That's the severed head thing.
Yeah.
So John the Baptist, wasn't he the precursor? He was the precursor of Christ's arrival.
Yes, yes. And he baptized Christ. After he baptized Christ, he baptized Christ in the River Jordan. And then he was told to come before Salome and
Herod.
I guess.
Yeah. Herod, yeah.
And that's when Herod foolishly promised Salome anything she wanted, and she said, "Bring me the head of John.
Yeah.
Bring me the severed head of John the Baptist."
It's a wonderful opera.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Well, I hope you all have enjoyed this experiment.
This was
Absolutely.
great.
Oh, I thought it was wonderful.
This reading,
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was terrific.
Yeah.
You plan to continue with it, Duncan?
You know, I'll put that in the perhaps. And what I mean by that is I think the ideal, this is in my mind right now, is that we have sessions where we just read and have a short discussion afterwards.
Yeah.
And then every once in a while, maybe like,
Yeah.
well, of course, we're going to run out of sessions on this one. We're pretty much, we're getting close to getting to the end of this. So maybe the next time we want to do another reading session and with a little bit of discussion, then the time after that, try this again, because we're going to be closer to the end of the book. And you know, I mean, I like this sort of thing myself.
Oh, I love this.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, really, it brings home to you what what is in there, and you don't need it every time, but once in a while it really helps.
The first time I read Ulysses in a group, we read it kind of like this. It took us 6 years.
Yeah. Easily.
That was the Cleveland group by some chance?
Yes.
Well, we're doing this in the Dante group. We started doing this. We've been reading together for a couple of years, maybe 2.5 years, and then we started doing more of this style. And you know, it's helpful, in my opinion.
Yeah. Oh, very.
There was a group
But-
once that formed to read Finnegan's Wake, and they moved at about this pace. It took them 19 years,
Yeah.
which makes it the only book I know of that took longer to read than to write.
Oh, well, I'm involved with the Venice Finnegan's Wake group. And probably within the next 3 or 4 months, we
Yeah.
will actually read the so-called final page.
Yes.
And they've been doing it for 28 years.
Yeah. How many times have they gone around?
But it's only been one time a month. No, they've never gone around. This will be the
Oh, this
first
is,
complete,
They're not around yet.
the first completion in 28 years.
Got to start when you're pretty young.
Yeah.
yes, you'd
Yeah.
want to start when you're young. You certainly would want to start at my age to go into one of those.
Oh, no.
Jerry Fialka's been the head of this reading.
Yeah.
So, and I believe he was probably 30 in his late 30s when
yeah.
probably in his early 30s when they started the reading.
Well, the Cleveland group, when we started reading Joyce, we read with a woman named Marjorie Johnson, and she was a Joyce scholar. And we started out reading it, like this. And then when she died, Bill Kennedy took over, and he said, I'm not having any part of this. And we started reading it much faster.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it was better that way than
Yeah,
picking it
yeah.
apart. But I like doing it once in a while because I
like the combination.
yeah.
Yeah.
Intimations of mortality.
Yeah.
All
Joan,
right,
what's
well,
your
thank you
cat's
for-
name? Joan?
Migo.
Migo, what a beautiful name. I love
But
those
he's-
gray tabby cats. They're gorgeous.
But he's very, very odd. But it's time for him to past his dinner time, and that's why he's walking back and forth.
all right.
He's a
totally
little,
Reminding you of your neglect.
yeah, he gets a little hysterical.
Amigo.
He's learned how to tell time.
Excellent.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. Great.
He's a good
Well,
pal.
thank you
Gorgeous.
all. Thank you all ever so much.
Thank you, Duncan. This was really
As
good.
always,
And then
I will
Great.
probably
Thank you, Donna.
not be here. I will probably not be here for the next 2 weeks. I'll be traveling. So
Oh,
if you finish without me, I'll catch up.
have a
Okay,
good trip.
very good.
Hey,
Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
have a good time, Louis.
Bon voyage.
Bye.
All right.
Bye.
Good night.
Red Buck.